Joining us now, Dave Kopel with the Independence Institute. Dave, welcome back to NRA News Cam and Company. How are you, sir?
I'm doing great. Thank you very much for having me.
And you've got quite an article here, my friend, in America's First Freedom, Sons of Heller. And
it's you know, as Tim Lee was saying yesterday, you know, we were talking about the good and the bad about what what's happening here in Washington, and one of the things he brought up was all the good that has come from the Heller decision. And Dave, this article is perfect timing. Just give us an overview of the piece before we ask some specifics.
The piece looks at 5 cases decided by the federal district courts, that is the trial court level, that were important and enforced Second Amendment rights. And yet they're cases that are not well known or widely reported, really, outside the locality where they took place. So I thought it was would be good for the readers of America's First Freedom and the public to know that this is going on. That certainly whenever you're litigating on civil rights, there's going to be losses as well as wins, and it's important to take a look at the wins and see what. Look at some of Heller's progeny.
Well, you know, it's interesting because I'm always interested in stuff that's going on public lands, on federal lands, and you talk about this case, Morris v. U.S. Army Corps of Engineers. We know that a few years back, in 2009, it was finally allowed once again that you could carry firearms on Department of Interior controlled lands. And for folks out west know that vast swatches of land west of the Rockies are owned or controlled by various federal agencies. The Department of the Interior's Bureau of Land Management, the National Park Service.
And didn't President Obama just put like another 1 million acres under federal protection?
That's right.
So the war in the West does continue.
Yeah, that's right. And so a Department of Interior lands, of which National Parks and Bureau of Land Management lands are under those. But
just to be technical, the Bureau of Land Management is part of the Department of Agriculture.
No, BLM? Are you sure?
Yeah.
Okay, I all right. Because I thought the USDA was U.S. Forest Service lands.
You know what? I may be wrong. I take that back. I may have confused the Forest Service and the BLM.
Yeah. So you've got Forest Service, which listen, it's one of those things where. There's a pastiche of agencies, which is the whole point of the importance of Morris,
it kind of
the U.S. Army Corps of Engineers. Because the U.S. Army Corps of Engineers controls national recreation areas, and so places like Lake Mead, because Lake Mead is Hoover Dam, and Hoover Dam is an Army Corps of Engineer project. So you have that, and so talk about the Morris case.
Sure, the Morris case was a challenge in Idaho to the Army's ban. It's kind of bizarre to me that the U.S. Army is running our dams and waterways.
That's strange,
you don't think
isn't
of
it?
that as really one of those core military functions.
Yeah.
But the Army Corps of Engineers prohibits firearms on all of its land, which is not just, say, the dam or the reservoir, like at Lake Mead, for example. It's huge amounts of land, much of which have been open to the public for recreation and camping, just the same way you can camp in, Bureau of Land Management or National Forest Service or wilderness areas or national parks. But of all those ones I just listed, only the Army Corps of Engineers has this absolute prohibition on firearms on its land. And
it's interesting, especially given the jurisdiction that the Army Corps of Engineers and the EPA want to jointly assert over vast amounts of land out west. This is important. I want to shift, though, because you have this issue, Dave, of the city of Chicago. We spend a lot of time on this show talking about Chicago. We spend a lot of time talking about what is the mayor's son got mugged right across the street from the mayoral mansion in Chicago. And yet Rahm Emanuel doing everything he can to push back against various decisions. Talk about the 2 cases that are dealing with Chicago.
Sure. So these are cases that were both resulted in victories. One is that after the McDonald versus Chicago in 2010, the Supreme Court said, that the Second Amendment really does apply to state and local governments, just like almost all the rest of the Bill of Rights does. The Chicago City Council repealed its handgun ban quite speedily, and then replaced it with the most draconian thing they could think of, and really ignoring the advice of some of their lawyers who said, you can't get away with this. This goes way too far. So, for example, they said that there can't be any firing ranges in the city open to the public, and they lost that case in the Seventh Circuit Court of Appeals in Azell versus Chicago. And they also said there can't be any gun stores in Chicago, and besides that, there can't even be any firearms transfers in Chicago. Like loaning a gun to a friend, for example, except by inheritance. So unless you die, you couldn't give anyone in Chicago your gun.
Let me ask you this, because you being in Colorado, you do a lot with property rights issues. I know the Independence Institute does a lot with property rights issues, and there are elements of property rights claims, lots of different kinds of property rights claims. But one of this is a violation of substantive and procedural due process. This idea that you can't get a fair shake because of the sort of the de facto position of government. I mean, these cases seem to me to be this sort of this de facto ban. I mean, it's not a ban in, I don't know what the Latin term is, but it's not a Latin ban in law, but in reality, that's what it is.
Well, sure, and that's the objective of the anti-gun people, is to, if they can't ban guns outright, to try to ban their use as much as possible. And, of course, that's the Bloomberg model we see on so-called universal background checks, which have, among other features, making it impossible as a practical matter to loan a gun to a friend for the weekend.
Wow. Speaking with Dave Kopel with the Independence Institute, this article in America's First Freedom, Sons of Heller. Dave, thank you for your great work.
Wait. They've got a party coming up.
Oh, okay.
You guys have something coming up on August 15th, don't you?
When's your party,
We
Dave?
have our annual alcohol, tobacco, and firearms party where you can celebrate freedom and annoy all the nannies. Now, I will say, it's at the Kiowa Creek. Go to the Independence Institute website, independenceinstitute.org. You get a day of alcohol, tobacco, and firearms. The firearms is shooting at the Kiowa Creek's sporting clays range southeast of Denver. And we do have a strict rule that you have to be finished with the firearms before the alcohol begins.
There you go.
Absolutely.
Special guest Dave Butts, Super Bowl legend.
Nice.
Yes.
Awesome. All right, Dave Kopel, thank you for the great work you do. You need to sit down and check out this article. It's full of great information.
We've linked to it at Cam and Company on Twitter, so please go there and read it.
Perfect. Thank you, Dave. Talk to you soon.
Okay, thank you.